ごめん、遅くなった。
Yes, I did what any upstanding anime watcher would do. I looked at the catalog, saw what was best, and I eventually picked everything. I'm not proud of it, but at least I learned something, and it's mainly that this season's pretty weird. I want to make it clear I don't hate any of these shows. So many seasons, people love to jump on hate, and while quality isn't what it might be next season, it's not like there's another one of this or that. It's up for you to say, but these are my top weirdest picks of summer 2024. My Dear Friend Nokotan. This is probably one of the weirdest shows on the list, and for good reason. Its opening theme has the most views out of any other this season, reaching 17 million views in just 2 weeks. It's also got very respectable ratings, but is it worth it? Well, the short answer is yes. It's an entertaining series that fully subscribes to the belief that random is funny. Now, shows like that are easily hit or miss, but when they hit, they're remembered for a long time, kind of like Nichijou and Azumanga Daioh. Another great aspect is specifically the meta humor, which often causes fourth wall breaking moments. And props to the narrator for making those moments even better. Surprisingly, for as wacky as the show gets, there is genuine progression between episodes, which I find very impressive to pull off. When it comes to visuals, the insane expression some of these characters have can only be compared to Bocchi the Rock. They do, in their own way, help carry the show, creating more dynamic scenes. Additionally, Nokotan, the main girl, dear, something like that, does so much for the series. Her presence, for some ungodly reason, causes everyone around her, aside from the main characters, to feel the same way she does. I wouldn't necessarily call it brainwashing, maybe manipulating without speaking. It's a very strange occurrence that helps add atmosphere to moments that need it. I'd be remiss without showing you an example.
じゃあ処女じゃないの？
It's a hard show to explain without watching, but just a glance at the OP might be enough. The halfway point moments are very cute and creative. The ending theme surprisingly feels very down to earth, and I do appreciate that. As risky as it was to add CGI, I do think the animation for the deer came across very naturally in almost a 2.5 dimensional way. It's very evident from watching the show that there was a lot of creative liberties taken when adapting the series. There's really so much great about it, from funny cliches to outer anime references, and because of that, I'm compelled to show you some of the best scenes.
くそ、なんで私が。絶対あいつだ。
おい、部活に外に顔を出すやつがあるか。ここは戦場だぞ。誰？
実際に野生の鹿と触れ合ったり、その時残したんがこれです。脱げ！着ぐるみを脱げ！
っていうかなぜこんな映像が？
前回放送の第3話の録画だよ。
Days with my stepsister. Bold statement alert, this might be one of the most introspective Inseki series I've ever seen. Unfortunately, I can't give it that #1 rating as I have seen Penguin Drum, and boy does that get very deep. So for those that don't know what I'm talking about, Inseki is a Japanese term. It basically means a romantic or sexual attraction to non-blood related family members. And given the show's title, I think you see where I'm going with this. Once episode 1 came out, I do think there was a not small group of people waiting eagerly to drop it, but just as the status distribution shows, it didn't carry over. Now, that could mean people want to give it a few more episodes. It could also mean people were surprised by how acceptable it was. I don't want to say great or not awful to give you the wrong idea. So my stance is not happy about having Inseki in the first place, but credit where credit is due, it was handled much better than almost any other of its kind. The mood is surprisingly very somber and serious, with what I believe to be realistic dialogue. What the show basically does is, instead of a more natural shift of easing into friendship, it eases into something more. What I believe it's really good at is stating the feelings and boundaries of both main characters every episode. Their closeness comes from the two sharing about their lives prior to being step-siblings and the struggles they either had or currently do endure. The only issue is when Saki's closeness becomes something greater than platonic love. I was willing to say the show knows what lines not to cross, but after episode 3, I'm not as sure. My wife has no emotion. Yes, another romance, but one I'd advise against. More specifically, their relationship, because it's not between two humans, this is between a guy and a female robot. As parasocial as it sounds, the main guy really has almost no one else around him. While the robot, Mina, isn't necessarily meant for romance, the entire show is all about pushing those boundaries as well as learning more about her. The guy is a typical company employee like the ones you might have seen in Zom 100, but a little less extreme. So I was actually close to calling this one unique, and I think others would agree if they hadn't seen shows like these. Yes, I'm talking about Chobits and Maho Romantic. Both early 2000s shows, both similar setups with their own unique outcomes. The sad truth is, it's a very indistinguishable series, it does very little story-wise, has some cute moments, but overall comes across niche. I do think it's worth mentioning my prediction, just for the fun of it. I think by the end of the season, Mina will show emotion. I think there were hints, I could be wrong. For example, when she said, "If I were not incomplete," possibly insinuating that with real emotion she could be complete. Another thing is that her last owner didn't want her because she didn't show human-like emotion. If that's not enough, there is of course the ending theme, which does show her smiling. Pseudo Harem. This is probably the weirdest way to get around having an actual harem without having a harem. Now there is upside to this, and it's fairly obvious. The idea of multiple girls and one guy, or vice versa, isn't for everyone. What's in a way groundbreaking is the ability to maintain the best harem tropes without actually having a harem. Now this is only possible since the main girl is a part of drama club. Basically, she's a good actor, and while it goes without saying, props to the voice actor. I know we don't normally think about it, but she has to, in a way, act out multiple characters for the effect of a harem to exist. That's absolutely not something most people could pull off, at least not as well as she has. Now, the voice actor, you hopefully know. Her name is Sayori Hayami, but if you don't know her, maybe you know some of the characters she voice acts. A few include Shinobu from Demon Slayer, Yor from Spy X Family, or Shoko from A Silent Voice. As for the content, it's mainly romantic leaning, but seemingly fruitless. Let's just say I've seen my fair share of romance anime. From what I've seen, I'm not convinced much progression, specifically romantic progression, will happen. Do I think they'll become better friends? Yes. Do I think the characters are written to be too embarrassed for any meaningful progression? Yes. 2.5 Dimensional Seduction. Can I just say, that's a stupid title, and no, the series is not much better. It's another romance cosplay anime, so ordinarily everyone jumps to My Dress Up Darling cause it's really the gold standard. Additionally, there is otaku culture, suggestive scenes, and a seemingly apprehensive guy around other girls. The two really deviate in quality. Unlike My Dress Up Darling, there's not as good of a balance between suggestive, romantic, and personal growth. Other negatives include a less serious atmosphere, but that might surprisingly be what they're going for. To be clear, it's not pretending to be anything nobler than fan service, but it almost hopes to capitalize on anything it somehow does get right. Something else I can appreciate is how self-aware the series is when it comes to cosplay, otaku culture, and the romantic feelings of each character. Everything said not only feels genuine, but, more importantly, feels in touch with the viewer's demographic. Now, it's not like it's bad, as I said, it's decent, but I don't necessarily see it improving all that much over the next few months. Senpai is an Otokonoko. A very LGBTQ-friendly rom-com series that tackles mainly gender identity. Now, that alone, of course, doesn't make it weird, but it does make it uncommon. I say that because you're much more likely to find solely yaoi or yuri content than something like this. In fact, I've only seen one other series truly similar to this one, called Wandering Sun, which I would recommend to you if you do like this show. Going into this, I probably should have looked up what Otokonoko was. According to Google, it's a Japanese term for men who have a culturally feminine gender expression, which I would say reflects the show well. Because I have a feeling people might take it another way that I'm putting this show on the list, I might as well show you an actually weird moment.
変態に見られるぞ。
呼びました。
By all accounts, it's a fine series. Definitely not the level of Wandering Sun, where that's at, but it's alright. Just to make a few comparisons, I see the art style as similar to two shows. One being My Stepmom's Daughter is My Ex, given a similar clear character design, and the other being possibly Place to Place. I know that's a weird connection, but I only mean in terms of the art style's constant change between added detail and more simple line work. Plus-sized elf. For one reason or another, I do think people have at least heard of this, whether from the title, the trailers, or any pre-released art. What I think less people know is just how much nudity there is. To be fair, it is ecchi, but of course that doesn't always mean this. Giving the briefest overview, the show goes over the life of an overweight elf that traveled from her world to our world seemingly for french fries. She hated the very healthy diet in her world, overate in ours, and basically is trying to get healthier. But does the premise work? Not really. I do think the right choice was for it to be a TV short. I say that because the comedy is downright silly at times, and for such simple antics, to drag out for any longer than 10 minutes would be very hard. Lastly, I want to connect the show with one other that not many might think about. Monster Musume. If you think about it, they're surprisingly not that different. Both have nudity, one main male character, and a bunch of female characters of different species represented with different colored hair. Again, please know I'm not here to accuse anything, I only like pointing out similarities between shows. But anyways, big thanks to everyone watching, I really hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you next time.